Alrighty. So thank you so much for everyone who is attending today's BigMarker 101 live demo of the hosting experience on BigMarker session. My name is Hannah Scherer. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at BigMarker, and I'll be taking you through our live demo today. So, just a little housekeeping before we get things started. I will be sharing my screen with you throughout today's demonstration, and it is live. We will be doing a live Q&A segment at the end of the session, so please ask any questions in the chat or Q&A section at any time, and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar. Now, you should be seeing my screen as we speak. Right now, I am landed on what's known as the BigMarker channel. The channel, and this is an example of Digital Ed's channel here on BigMarker, is your company or your organization's overarching account for your webinar hosting. So that means that all of your webinars will be kind of put into this one single space. You can access both upcoming and recorded webinars at any time. Again, this is kind of the place where all of your webinars live and are stored. But as you'll see to the right of here as well, you can also have multiple people from your team managing the channel as channel hosts. The first two do come free with your account, but if you need any additional ones, so any additional team members who would be setting up webinars, organizing them, or even managing the channel settings, it's just $19 a month per host additionally. So again, all of these webinars, they are kind of listed out in grid view here, but they're actually all their own individual webinar landing pages that if I were to click on one of them, it would take me to this page. And that is not only where the recording is stored if it's a recorded webinar, but it's also where people come to register for your webinar and to host the live thing, the live webinar. So it's really important to make those landing pages look great, and I can show you how to make one of those now. So to create an actual webinar on your BigMarker account, all you have to do is locate the green schedule button at the top right of the corner on your BigMarker page. Pretty much anywhere on BigMarker, you'll see this green schedule button. All you have to do is click it, fill out the details that it asks in the modal, so things like giving it a title, selecting the date and time, you know, the very basic stuff, and then clicking that green schedule button again. And that's going to essentially create a landing page for your webinar. And I've actually already gone ahead and created a webinar here to show off as an example. And I've landed here now on the landing page of the webinar. And this is the page that not only you as the host will see when you come to your webinar, but it's also the page that your audience will see. So it's really important to really make this look good, look nice, because this is where people will be registering and also attending your webinar. So you'll notice right off the bat, we're actually on this classic template format. We have a few different templates to kind of choose from when we're designing our webinar, which we'll get to in a moment. But the layout of the page essentially is the same. So you have your webinar title, you'd have a countdown clock with an add to calendar functionality and a register button here before the webinar. When it's live, you'll just see this enter webinar button, which is, in this case, it is live. And then below this, you'll see all of the details about the webinar. So about section with agenda topics, date and time of the webinar you'll see, and also the featured presenters. So if you yourself or one of your team members would be hosting the webinar, also any additional like co-hosts or guest hosts would also be listed in this section. And finally, again, the channel. So again, your channel is the place where you're hosting your webinars from. So when it says hosted by, that just means your channel name. And again, like I mentioned, you can edit all of these kind of settings and designs and all of that kind of good stuff as a host by clicking on the edit, the design, or the promote and manage sections of your webinar landing page. And again, this is only visible to you as the host. So it's really important to note that your audience will not see this when they come to the page. So the first thing I wanted to check out is the edit section. The edit section is responsible for cleaning up all of your webinar details, making any additional edits to the actual content of the webinar. So things like if you wanted to change your webinar title or add a description to your webinar, we'll get through all of that. Also, another cool thing to note here is the schedule type of the webinar, and we have 3 kind of settings to choose from, and it is really important to know the differences between these. So the schedule type of your webinar, the first option here, we have single session. Now, most of you will be selecting this for your webinar. It's the automated selection when you schedule a webinar. It's just your standard run-of-the-mill webinar type. It means you can record. It's just a one single session. You pick the start time. When you think webinar, 9.9 times out of 10, this is what you should be choosing. But we do have 2 other options as well. The recurring option is your second option, and this is if you plan to host the same webinar over and over again. So, for example, I tend to host public demos about once every week. And so instead of actually having to create a new session each time, I could select the recurring option, and then I have all of the time slots that I want to give for this webinar. So perhaps I want to give it every Tuesday or something like that at 1 o'clock. Then I would just select the time, and then when people go to the webinar landing page, the main event page, they'd be able to select the time and register for the time that works for them. Finally, we have the always open section that is also really important to note. And you'll also notice that I'm actually using this feature today. And the reason why is because this is an always open meeting room or webinar room that can be used for a lot of really nice things. First and foremost, it's great for meetings, like I mentioned. So quick meetings, it's always open, meaning that you can enter the webinar or the meeting room at any time, and you can share the link. The link does not change. So it's really great, again, for quick meetings, internal meetings, or you just want to send the link and jump right in. It's also great for me because I demonstrate the webinar experience a lot, and so instead of having to create a new webinar each time, I just simulate the same webinar over and over again, and it never closes. So again, the always open webinar room is best used for meetings and quick kind of interactions that you want to do on the fly. The one caveat is that you cannot record in this function. So if you do want to host like a recorded webinar, it's good to pick either the single session or the recurring session based on your needs. You'll also notice we have a few other kind of cool features here, such as adding presenters. It's pretty straightforward stuff. You just click Add New Presenter here, and then you can fill out the details. Just below that, you'll also note that we have a sell tickets option. So if you wanted to monetize your webinars, you can do so just by selecting paid tickets and selecting the price for your price to attend live and also the recording as well. Finally, we have the privacy settings here, and this is the kind of final part that I wanted to cover. So the privacy settings allow you to decide if you want to make it a public webinar or a private webinar. The difference being that public webinars are listed publicly on BigMarker. They are searchable on BigMarker and potentially even search engines like Google. Private ones have a different privacy settings that you can choose from in the advanced privacy, but the automated selection is anyone with the webinar link can attend. So as long as you're comfortable with sharing that link out with people, then that's the setting for you. Otherwise, you can use one of our advanced privacy settings to change that. And then finally, you can also decide who can view your recorded webinar just by selecting your preference for the view recording permissions. So, for example, instead of having anyone with the link being able to view your recording, it could be limited to only those who attended the webinar, or if you wanted to limit it to just yourself, the channel admin or presenter of the webinar, you could do that too. So that's all I really wanted to cover in the edit section. If we do have any questions about these, we will get to them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. But I'm going to move on now to the design portion. The design portion is what essentially will determine the aesthetics, the look and feel of your webinar landing page, and also a few other images that are important to note. So the first one is the landing page template. If you want to change the way or the look or the feel of your webinar, you can always change the template of your landing page. So, for example, we have the classic one that I'm using today, but also we have things like, this one with the nice countdown to it, countdown clock, or a nice minimalist one if you want to have it really, really straightforward and simple, or even this billboard one with a very large image. So you have a ton of options here. We are constantly adding more to this section, but all you have to do is select the template by selecting that you want to use it, and also clicking customizing it in order to add images and all of that good stuff. The next kind of tab that I wanted to get to in the design section is your logo in the conference room. So this is adding your logo into the live BigMarker webinar room. This means that instead of having the BigMarker be in the top left-hand corner, you could actually add your own branding to the live webinar, in addition to even changing the theme color so that you have the fully customized top banner of your webinar screen. Finally, we have the webinar preview card, and this is just what shows up if you were to, say, share the link on social media, or what shows up in your channel in grid view. This is that preview image to the webinar. So that's all we have to cover in the design section. The final portion of the webinar hosting experience from an admin's perspective, and from a pre-webinar standpoint of, setting everything up and making sure everything looks and sounds good, is your promote and manage section. And this is all of your marketing and promotional tools that you have access to, as well as all of your management and analytical tools as well. So you'll notice we land here on the dashboard of your promote manage section. And right off the bat, I just want to call to your attention a few really key details. So the first is the webinar dashboard. The webinar dashboard shows you your webinar URL, so a shareable link that you can copy and share wherever you'd like. Below that, you'll notice you have a ton of statistics, all of your webinar analytics that you're able to utilize at any time. So we have the before, during, and after kind of view of each of these kind of important statistics. So the registration statistics will show you, how many people are registered for your webinar, where they're coming from. So are they registering from an email you sent, from invitations, or are they registering from the page? So maybe you shared the link on social media or something. You'll see where people are coming from. Also, during the live webinar, you'll be able to see where people are, coming from. Are they coming from desktop or mobile device? Are they coming from Chrome browser, Firefox, or something like that? You'll also see how long people were attending the webinar for versus how long they were actually engaged for. So on a per attendee basis, you'll see how long were they actually in the room for versus how long were they paying attention to your webinar, meaning how long were they on the tab of your webinar page for. And then in your recording statistics, you'll just be able to see how many people viewed your recording. Just below the statistics, you'll see that you can integrate with a lot of tools, mainly marketing, CRM, and mail tools here on BigMarker, so things like HubSpot, Salesforce, MailChimp, the big kind of names in that space you're able to integrate with and send and receive email lists that way. Finally, I do want to cover a few more things in the Promote Manage section, specifically on this left toolbar. So first is downloading your recording. So again, your recording will live on your webinar landing page, but if you did want to download your recording as an MP4 file and do whatever you like with it, perhaps you want to share it on YouTube or put it on your website, you can download your recording, and again, it's an MP4 file. Just above that, you'll see that you have the ability to add custom registration fields, which means that if you want to gather more information than just name and email from your audience, you can do this just by adding custom registration fields and asking questions, for example, like their occupation or their phone number or something like that. So when they register, you're getting more information from your registrants than just their name and email. All the way up to the top now, The only other things that I really want to mention here are you can always preload your content once your webinar page is live. So you can do things like pre-upload your slideshows, files, PowerPoints, also videos, so MP4, YouTube videos, all of that kind of content. You can always pre-upload, and then you could even decide if you want to autoplay it, meaning that if you want to host an automated webinar, you have the option to do that as well. The very final thing I want to mention in this section is the send email invitation section. This allows you to send invites to your email list, any kind of list that you want to either import directly, or you can integrate with your favorite tool in order to send out the right list. So again, we've gone through the setup and creation process of a webinar. Now it's actually time to dive into the live webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the webinar. I can do this from the Promote Manage section or the landing page of the webinar. But you'll see here, and this is really important to note as well, I am entering the webinar as an admin, as a host of the webinar. So my view will be a little bit different than my attendees' view. So right off the bat, I get this test my audio and video screen. So if I have external microphones or webcams, I can have those plugged in, and then I can make those selections at this time. Or I can just do a quick test and make sure my webcam looks good, microphone sounds good, etc. Then, when I continue to my webinar, this is the blank state of the webinar room. And it's really just split into 4 parts. 2 of those parts are what your audience will see. So the first part is your presentation screen. Now, I'm not sharing any content right here, but if I were, it would be taking up this screen. And this is, again, what my audience and myself will see. So if I'm sharing a slideshow here, my audience will see a slideshow, and I'm going to see the same slideshow. Same with the chat panel. Your audience will also have access to the chat, people, poll, Q&A, and handout section, which can be edited if you need to edit any of the details. But just letting you know right off the bat, these are the only 2 things that your audience members will see. They will not see anything else, in terms of the final 2 parts of the webinar room. So now we're getting into host territory. Hosts have access to 2 of the additional parts of the room, the first being your sharing toolbar here at the top of the screen. This allows me to do things like share my microphone as I'm doing right now, or share my webcam if I wanted to share both my microphone and webcam. Also, I can share my screen. This is what I'm showing you right now, where my mouse movement is showing and demonstrating the browser in real time. Otherwise, I can share files. So again, I can share PowerPoints, I can share PDF files, I can share a whole wealth of images and all that kind of content, as well as video files as well. So again, YouTube or MP4 files I can share. And again, these will all display in the presentation section. So if I take a file that I've already uploaded and I open it, it's going to display in this presentation section, and again, my audience is going to see exactly what I see here, with the exception of these slide toggles here. They won't see that. So I can go through my slides, it will update for them in real time, and I can kind of go through my presentation very simply. The final piece to the hosting puzzle is your host control panel. Your host control panel accounts for all of your audience permissions, all of your kind of admin permissions, so things like recording your webinar. Again, I can't record because this is the always open 24/7 room, but if it were just your regular run-of-the-mill webinar or a recurring webinar, you can always click record, and then again, the recording will post to the landing page of your webinar. Now, in the audience section, you'll notice that our audience permissions, we have 4 toggles that are turned on at the start of the webinar, and then we have 2 that are turned off. And these are certainly done for a reason. So the first 4 control your chat, people, poll, Q&A, and handout section. For example, if you do not want to show your attendee list, meaning in the People tab, showing your audience how many people are attending the webinar or who is in the webinar, you'll want to turn that off. Same with the public chat. So in this chat portion here, you have a public chat that your audience can contribute to and everyone can see at the same time. If you do not want your audience to be able to contribute to the public chat, you just turn that toggle off. And then finally, we have the Q&A features. So the Q&A is a little bit separate from the chat in that it's a place specifically for asking questions. If you want to disable this entirely and just use the chat, you can. Or you can keep it on and you can turn off the view Q&A, and this will allow your audience to be able to submit questions, and only you as the host can then view those questions. The audience members would not be able to view them. So again, these 4 settings are turned on at the start of the webinar. And the 2 that are not turned on, I highly recommend keeping them off unless you're hosting a very small meeting. Because what these will allow, if I were to turn them on, is it will enable or allow all of your attendees to be able to share their microphone or their webcam at any time. Obviously, if you're hosting a webinar where you're doing the bulk of the presentation, you don't want people to be able to turn on their microphones or webcams at that time. However, it is a very useful meeting tool, as I mentioned. If you do want to allow everybody the ability to speak or share, video or anything like that, you can turn that on and they'll have access to it. But again, use this sparingly and use it wisely, because you don't want to get yourself into a situation where people are sharing their microphones or webcams who should not be. However, if you do want to allow certain attendees to be able to share their microphone or webcam without turning on all of or enabling all access to it, you can always scroll to your attendee section, and everybody will be listed out here, very similarly to how my name is listed here in the admin section. And they'll have these same icons next to their name with some slash marks through them. All you have to do to enable one person's microphone or webcam without giving everyone access is just to enable that certain person's microphone or webcam by clicking those icons and enabling it for that one person. Finally, we have the advanced section of the host control panel. I wouldn't worry too much about this section. You can decide first if you want to broadcast in HD. This allows you to have a clearer experience. And then also hiding all tweets. So if you did connect a hashtag to your Twitter account just by clicking Learn More in the chat section and adding a hashtag, if you needed to hide the tweets at any time, if something gets out of hand or you just want to make them disappear, you just go here to your advanced settings and click turning on the hide all tweets. So again, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've covered the channel section, we've covered the webinar setup and editing process, and then we've covered the live hosting experience. I'm now going to turn it over to our audience to see if we have any questions coming in at this time, and then we will be able to go into our last segment, the Q&A portion of the webinar. Finally, I did want to extend the offer that we promote for attending our demos. To all of you who attended today, you will receive an email following today's session with a 50% off discount for your first 2 months, so stay tuned for that. Alrighty, so I am getting questions coming in here in the chat. Okay, so actually I'm going to cover this question offline. So